The Gothic architectural style in Europe lasted from the mid-12th century to the 16th century. This style of architecture values height and intricate ornamentation. Crucial innovations in engineering and design, such as the pointed arch and rib vault, prove most notable in defining Gothic architecture of the time. The Middle Ages came about after the fall of the Roman Empire. They were rooted with a new sense of scholasticism and Gothic humanism and unifying influence. In an economic and societal mixture, feudalism played a major role in defining the Middle Ages. It was a system where there was a hold of land in exchange for service and labor. Historians explain a growing sense of rationality amongst men. Men agreed on many fundamental doctrines. They started with the belief that agreement was possible, but knew that when in disagreement, no two men were both right. In the Middle Ages, men could disagree on who was the rightful pope, but did not deny the papacy itself. To push to magnify man while at the same time not detracting from the perfection of divine power was a common theme throughout this period of time. Seemingly, much of the change in society, culture, and religion is exemplified through the architecture of the time and how it strayed from that of the previous Roman style. Much of the naturalism portrayed in the ornamentation of building textures and design in this time are in direct relation to the Gothic humanist movement. The Gothic style grew out of the Romanesque architectural style. Romanesque work tends to have a more classist origin, preserving round arches and mass qualities associated with that of Roman work. It is described as built with great solidity, heaviness, and a rude simplicity. Moreover, this style of architecture was not as texturally based, with icons and elaborate designs, as that of Gothic work. This style of architecture has a general unfavorable appeal among historians because of its lack of textural, artistical, and meticulous detail as seen in the Gothic age. Again, unlike prior Romanesque work, Gothic architecture is typically very heavily ornamented and solid. Every display in Gothic work can be expected to be detailed with windows, crosses, religious icons, and symbols held up by slender pillars that would prove surprisingly sturdy through the ages. Despite the great complexities of Gothic structures, there is little known about the processes of their designs. Unlike modern builders, there was not nearly an infinite amount of materials, products from different countries, or even split tasks such as architects, engineers, or financiers. In the medieval age, architects took upon all these jobs, and with his sole equipment being a straight edge, square, a compass, and decided on site how to build. Additionally, instead of having geometric principles, Gothic architects relied on a more practical style algorithm. It was a procedural step-by-step in relation to building each part of the structure, not mathematical, but rather empirical. Perhaps the most fundamental element of the Gothic style of architecture is the pointed arch. Building walls strengthened and could be built taller than ever before. These would prove beneficial to stabilization, allowing many of original Gothic architecture to last for hundreds of years. Additionally, pointed arches played a major role in establishing a successful rib vault. Further, the creation of rib vaults allowed for pressure to be taken off the walls and put on the pillars. The vault allowed weight to be equally distributed amongst 6 pillars and thus allowed each pillar to be thinner and taller. Nevertheless, the transition in vault structures was a key part in creating the framework allowing an equilibrium in Gothic architecture to succeed. The art depicted by the stained glass can be related towards the increasing movement of realism. The artistic richness and historic importance of stained glass in the Gothic architecture is often overlooked. It is through the meticulous detail of stained glass that culture involving that surrounding religion at the time can be revealed. The rows of windows above the aisle bays below prove most original to cathedral design at the time. Moreover, it is at this point in time that the use of stained glass spanning as a wall is first introduced. This has to do with the new beginning engineering methods and structural attributes like thinner walls that allowed this to be successfully displayed. Initially, gargoyles served as waterspouts to protect the Gothic structures from rain. As time continued, the symbolization of gargoyles morphed and would essentially help depict stories from the scriptures. The use of gargoyles also helps one understand the lack of literacy and education during this period amongst the people. Much of the change in society, culture, and religion is exemplified through the architecture of the time and how it strayed from that of the previous Roman style. Much of the naturalism portrayed in the ornamentation of buildings, textures, and design in this time are in direct relation to the Gothic humanist movement. The construction of the Notre Dame Cathedral proved tremendous growth of Paris in the 12th century. Notre Dame would stand as the tallest, longest, and widest Gothic structure of its time. The structure also continues to be a representation of how gigantic Gothic structures proved to be in the elaborate engineering of architects and builders of its time. Unlike prior works in this style, Notre Dame was built in separate stages and combined, and instead of building a progressive and connected manner. Again, the scope of the project and the style of the time called for a completely new way of working. Today, millions continue to visit the cathedral and admire the iconic Gothic structure each and every day. Gothic-style works would be succeeded by the Renaissance. It was during this time that the word Gothic would be coined to describe the prior style of architecture. Artists in the Renaissance period criticized the works and called it Gothic in reference to German barbarians. During this time, architects reverted back to a more Roman-influenced architectural style and focused heavily on material culture. They hoped to create structures that would appeal to both emotion and reason. Semicircle arches and hemispherical domes replaced complex proportional systems seen in that of the Gothic era. Today, Gothic architecture in France can be seen in almost every city. Even though today many cathedrals and Gothic structures still stand, no architect has ever been able to properly restore or create a Gothic cathedral, a form of which only exists in today in monuments of the past. Constant efforts to restore, renew, and rebuild Gothic cathedrals is common.